Let's go ahead and do this. So, and I'm probably going to just give out, this is probably what we're going to do at the start of the class each time. I'll just give out a different little, kind of doing the same thing where we're doing these kind of just vanilla JavaScript, practicing like the CRUD stuff on these things. So just so this becomes like really just kind of ingrained in your brain. So let's do this first one. So this one, I want to take this array of objects, ID, number, name, ID, name, age, and return it in an array of strings. You know, name is age. So this one, I'm expecting peeps to be just an array of objects that have the key ID, name, and age. So I can do a map. And I'm going to map over my peeps. Just call this whatever peep. Kind of. For this, I want to return a string. Peep.name is peep.age. Test this out. Let's do say let strings equals this about, pass it, you know, the people. Then I can console.log strings. Let's go ahead and run this. It's going to be a little issue, but we'll look at it. Undefined. Why is this returning undefined? My about function is returning undefined.
Because peep is like not attached to any data, like peep.
Okay, so let's look at that. You're saying this peep is not attached to any data. Let's just see what it is. So let's log this peep and see what this is. So as you're going through this, console.logs can be a really good kind of like educational tool. So see, when I console.log peep, what it is it's just each thing in my array.
What did you do to fix the undefined?
It's not undefined. It's not fixed. It's still returning undefined.
What did you change though? Because mine's just only saying undefined right now.
I added a log right here in my map function.
Wait, I have a quick question. I know you've gone over this before, but how is like peeps and peep like recognizing the array of people?
Yeah, this is something like, I think it's really, people really get hung up on this and they get confused. So I'm glad you asked this question. And this is kind of why I'm choosing these names. I'm kind of making them a little like silly for like reason. Like, so remember this about, and let's just do this as like, I'm going to come down here and just do a very simple function. I'm just going to call it foo because it doesn't really matter what I call it. And then I'm going to call it, it takes a parameter X. I remember how to write an arrow function. So here I'm defining a function called foo. It takes a parameter called X. And then it just takes that parameter and it logs it. So if I do foo of A, or like foo of 22. I have a variable, I say like let t equal, yo, and I do foo of t. I run this, right? Foo's foo, when I pass it a, it's just going to log a. Foo, when I pass it 22, it's just going to log 22. Foo, when I pass it this variable t, well, t is just yo, so it logs yo.
So that X is basically a placeholder for whatever you're gonna eventually put in it.
Yes, the technical term for this is X is a parameter. And with functions, we can give it many parameters. So if I now do X, Y, Z, what is Y going to be and Z? And let me just, yeah, we can just look at these examples.
They should be. They should be undefined, right?
Yes, exactly. Because I'm only giving these, when I call the function foo, I'm only passing one. So here's the, and I'll go over this technical lingo again. So X, Y, and Z are parameters. This is my function definition. I have a function called foo, and I'm giving it 3 parameters. I'm defining 3 parameters. And you can think of parameters as like kind of variables that are scoped to just the function. So that's the function definition. Now here I'm actually calling the function. And then I pass functions, they're called arguments. I'm passing functions arguments. So I'm only passing foo here. I'm only passing it 1 argument. Well, foo has 3 parameters in its definition. And let me just comment this out so I don't get too many logs. So when I call foo of A, it's going to log A because that's X, but then Y and Z are undefined because I need to pass those to the function A1 and 2. So foo now takes, I can now give it 3 arguments and it will log, the 3 arguments.
So what would happen if you gave foo a 4th argument since there's only 3 parameters?
I mean, nothing. It just doesn't do anything. Like there's no way. So like, there's like no way I can like grab that value. So that's,
Okay.
It doesn't break it, but it's not doing anything because I'm not doing anything with that this in here.
Okay.
So where you can get yourself into, like, so this was working where like, I could just pass it 1 parameter, A, and it wouldn't break it. It would just log undefined. But what if I do something like this, let's say I do like Y dot push, 1, and then return Y. So now if I run this, so I do foo of A. So it's going to log A because that's the first parameter. And then I get an error. The error is cannot read push of undefined. So I'm doing this Y dot push method, but since I'm not passing it anything, it's going to throw an error.
So for that to work, you have to add something right there where you're about to add.
Yeah, so let's like add a 1. And let's store this to a variable, let X equal that. What's it dot log X? What is X going to be? Honestly, I don't even have an idea.
Can you name it different than X? Because that's kind of going to confuse me because you already have the X from up top.
No.
Well, why did you name it X again?
What?
Why would you name it X again?
Because the name doesn't matter. You need to understand the difference because the names don't matter. So I know it's confusing, but it's something that you kind of just got to drill it like this X right here. This is a parameter of a function definition. So it's only kind of visible to this part of the code. So this X right here has nothing to do with that X.
Okay.
So
And the reason I say it's important to know that, because I think why people get confused is because so often you do see you do see stuff with like the same name. And people get confused because they think they're seeing the same name and they're thinking it's the same thing.
yeah, like that's part of my problem as well.
Yeah, I think that is definitely very confusing.
So X is gonna equal the foo A1. So is it gonna be A2? Since you already have the Y push 1, so is it just gonna add another? So it's gonna be
Let me make this. I'm going to get rid of that because
okay.
let's do this for now. And yeah,
X.
these names are confusing. Let's get rid of that T.
So console log X, let X equal foo A1, foo equals.
James, is the better way to think of it is the X's are just addresses for information to know where it's going. It's when it's inside the definition, it's like its own little city where you have the address within that city of where the information needs to go to.
Yeah, if that works for you, I think that, because I mean, yeah, that's a good way to think of a variable is like an address. So
Because I mean, it could be a number, it could be a name. It's just a way for the computer to know that I need to go to here to do what you want me to do. It's just a point in place in time for it to know where to go.
yeah,
So if you hit console.log right here, would it just log A?
yeah, it's going to log A. That's true. But what is X on line 45? What is X going to be?
X is just the X equals foo, and then it's taking the foo from the const, right? So it should just put A in the place of the first parameter and one in place of the second. I don't
And
know.
then the third being undefined?
No, X, there's a very like one word answer to this. What is
Okay.
X? There's just, it's,
You're only returning Y in the function, so it's just 1.
yes, it's going to be 1. This
return
function
Y.
is not, this is like a function that really, I mean, this is a silly function. It doesn't do anything useful. It's more to get you to think about what functions do.
Okay, so since you're just returning Y, it's not even gonna log the first one, it's just gonna return 1.
It's going to log X. So it's going to log A, but my question is, what is X going to be? And X is going to be 1 because this function returns Y. And when I call it with A and 1. Well, 1 becomes Y, so that's what it returns. So that return, that's what gets stored to the variable.
But why does that work if you have 3 parameters on top and then you're only putting in 2, like the A and the 1 at the bottom?
Because I'm not this Z parameter, it's like declared, like, and VS Code is telling me this, it's like it's declared, but its value is never read. So it's not gonna break anything. It's just kind of right now it's unnecessary.
Okay, so you don't need to give it 3 arguments to that parameter for it to work.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
need, yeah, because it takes 3 parameters, but I don't have to give it 3.
Okay.
So there's my 1.
So explain to me one more time how X is equaling 1. Because I didn't quite comprehend how you said that the first time.
Okay, let's back up. If I do like a console.log Y, okay, so just kind of ignore this part or X. like, my question is, what inside of here, like, what is this going to log? Like, what is y?
Y should be equal to 1, correct?
1, yeah. So when I return y, I go back to the way it was. So this foo function just returns the second, it returns y, which is the second argument.
Oh, because the first one's a string and it has no.
What is z going to be?
By off of how you had it, I think it would be true,
Yes.
but I just don't understand why it's picking true out of it. Why is it skipping over the A?
It's not skipping over the a. Like, it's as like when you are coding, you just need to be super, super literal. All right. I'm calling foo, I'm passing an a and 1. Cool. So when I call foo, this x becomes a and this y becomes 1. So if I do a console.log x, well, that's going to be the string a. And if I return y, well, that's going to be 1. If I call it again and I pass it like v and true, well,
X is now V and Y is now true.
Yeah. Well, x is going to be v and y is going to be true. So now z, like this foo, like evaluates, like if I were to ask you like, what is 1 plus 1? What would you kind of do in your head?
Put them together.
Yeah, you would say that's 2. When you think about function calls, you can think of this as like kind of like that, like you can evaluate this. In my mind, looking at the definition, this is really just 1. This is true. Because I know this function foo just returns the second argument that I pass it.
That's a little easier to understand. It's kind of a tricky subject, but the way that you broke it down, I at least understand it.
Cool.
But if you were to return X, then it would return both of those values, right?
Well, yeah, okay, so let's return.
If you were to turn X and Y.
So I can't return 2 things.
Okay.
I can return
yeah, that's
X.
right.
Because remember, if we return something, the function's done. Like, see,
Okay.
this is grayed out. So it's saying
Yeah.
unreachable code detected. How would I return X and Y? Well, I could return them as an object. So I can, I could return X and Y together, but I would just return them as a object. That's one way. If you need to return multiple things, you can return it as an array or an object. Cool. So let's do this now. Let's do this y dot push. So now we're going to throw this back in here. I'm doing this y dot push.
Can you put the return back to X or Y?
Let's just leave it like this. This way we can see both. We can see what,
Okay.
like this function just takes 2 things and throws them in an object. So let it kind of just be a little confusing. It's really like, this is really dead simple, actually. Like once like these concepts are in, like get in your head, you're gonna like look at this in like 2 weeks and you're gonna be like, why was this so confusing? Because this is like a more simple example. But yeah, since I'm using these different like X and Y and foo, and I can totally see why you're getting confused. But I want to get to this next important part with like functions and calling functions. So so now I have my function definition. I have this y param, and I'm doing y dot push, and I'm going to push, let's just say value pushed here. So when I run this now, so notice what in this specific case, when I call foo, X is going to be A and Y is going to be 1. Well, that's going to be a problem, right? Why is that a problem? And you can see the error. You can maybe look at that for a hint.
Can you define to me what push is doing again? And then I think I could explain.
Yeah, exactly. So push is a method on arrays that pushes a value to the end of the array.
So it's leaving one of them undefined, and I believe it would be it's leaving Y undefined because now Y has been pushed to the Z parameter.
No, it's so much more simpler than that. See, like I can hear the confusion because the answer is really simple.
It
What
says
is
Y
Y?
push is not a
What's
function.
Y in this case?
1.
1. Okay, I just told you.
Y is already there, so you can't push something that's already there.
I just told you what push is. Push is a method that you call it on an array to add an item to the end of that array. Is 1 a array? Is that in an array?
No.
If I gave you I don't know, if I gave you like a basketball and I was like, hey, would you ride your bike on, or I don't know, would you eat this? You would say, no, that's not food. That's a basketball. Like you can't eat a basketball. Like this 1 is a number. You can't push something onto a number. So when we write functions, and I'm saying like y dot push, well, now I'm having this expectation that y is going to be in an array. So if you call the function and you don't pass me an array, it's
going to break.
Yeah, it's going to break, or it's going to give me unexpected values. So I need to pass that in an array. And so then now when I do it, now it works. So I pass it as the second argument in an array that just has some string in it. And now I can push that second value to it.
So you can never push numbers?
No.
Okay.
Because what would that mean? Like, how do you, push is I guess that could kind of makes, you would maybe think it add the number to the end of the number, but that's a little strange, I guess. So yeah, push is a method on arrays.
So you wouldn't have arrays of numbers?
Oh, you could totally have an array of numbers.
Then you can push numbers when they're in an array.
But the way, okay, so this is how I had it before. 1, that's not in an array, that's a number. This is in an array of numbers. So breaks, this works. What if I did this? So instead of pushing something, let's push Z. I'm going to comment that out because it's going to break. So I have my foo. So what this is going to go through my function, it's going to log A, and then it's going to take this second argument, which should be an array because I'm calling the push method, Well, lucky for me, I know this needs to be an array, so I pass in an array of numbers. And then I push Z onto that array. And then I return a object with the key X, which is going to be my first parameter, and Y, which is going to be my array with the second thing pushed onto it. And I don't have X defined because I called that Y. There you go. So
Okay.
there I'm logging A, and there's the return value that, and I can just do
So now technically, like with that function, it's leaving Z undefined, and now Y is 1 and taco. After you push it.
Z is not undefined.
But I understand that, but what I'm saying is like after it's pushed, that's kind of basically what you did was take that value out of Z, put it onto Y, and now those two are together.
Yeah, so now Z is in that Y array. So let me slack out this example. I know this gets very kind of like, it's very mind bending at times, but it's really, you are going to get to a point where like, why was this so confusing at one point? Because it's insanely literal. So, but does this kind of help? Is this kind of making it a little more clear?
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
When we break it down like this, yeah, it definitely does.
And yeah, like this is why it's kind of good to look at, like, this function is obviously, I mean, it's kind of good to look at examples where like it doesn't really do anything useful. It's more just challenging yourself to kind of like, okay, what is it? Like, what are we doing here? So I think this can be good on your own to kind of like do stuff like this. And, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you break stuff and then you fix it. That's the nice thing about coding is, man, it's so easy to experiment and just try things out, and
So
then-
as long as one thing that you're returning at the bottom, an array, it works because you put one in an array.
Yeah, well, it doesn't, it could be an empty array.
But as long as there is an array, then
Yeah.
it'll work because you're using push.
I guess more technically, it just needs to have this Y thing needs to have a push method on it. That's like the technical answer. But for this, when I'm defining it, like I was like, oh yeah, I'm expecting Y to be in an array.
So if you did like Z push where taco is, that would have to be an array.
Yes, so if I switch
Okay.
that to Z push Y, then I would want to like make that third argument an array.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So let's go back up to this. So now let's actually, and let me just delete this and write it again. Okay, so let's go back to our about function. So this takes this function. This is our function definition. I'm calling this peeps. Now, what I'm expecting peeps to be is an array. And then I'm expecting it to be an array of objects that have ID. That needs to be a number. And it has name. I'm expecting that to be a string. And it has age, and I'm expecting that to be a number.
So right now, peeps is just the parameter that you chose, and right now it's undefined.
This is the function definition. It's not peeps is, I'm kind of like creating a function, and like I'm engineering a function that takes an array of objects and returns a string. Like I'm not calling it, nothing's defined. I'm just I'm just going to create this so the world has this awesome function to take objects and, make it into a readable string. So, and I could call this X, I could call this T, but as I'm defining this function, I'm going to make some good names. I'm going to call this about, and I'm going to call this peeps because I'm really expecting this to be people, but I am kind of, let's call this people. This is saying right now, people is declared, but its value is never read. Well, it's right there. See how this people is grayed out? It's not, these are not the same. And that's why I was kind of calling this peeps to show that. So I want to do, so here's my function definition. I'm going to do like the peeps.map. Now it's kind of going back to this. Did I delete that? I'm going to throw this back. It's kind of going back to this idea where, I'm calling the dot map on peeps. So I'm expecting, like here I was expecting Y to be in an array. So here I'm making the expectation that peeps is in an array, and I'm expecting it to be an array of objects with these types of data. So I'm being very specific. Now map, what I can do with map is I pass it a function. I'm just going to call that param. I pass map a function that takes that can take one param. And the param is going to be, so map goes through each thing in my array and performs this function. And the param is going to be that current thing in the array that it's iterating over. So I can return, param dot name is ram dot age. So map goes through each thing in my array and runs this function, and the thing that this function returns, it's going to store into a new array, which it finally returns at the end of the day. So when we went back to this example and we ran it, I'm getting undefined. So
Is it because because you have a third object in there, which is the ID, and you didn't return it?
Yeah, I don't need to use that ID. I don't, with map, I can use whatever. I mean, I could technically just return 1. We'll look at that in a second, but yeah, that's not quite it. So once map is done, so map's a function that returns that new array. So I actually want to do something with that. See, and we can console. So let's store that into a variable so we can console.log it. There's that new array. There it is. Toby is 21. John is 22. So I have it. My map is working. That's what I want it to do. But why, when I come down here, and let me just make this even more clear. It's logging the thing I want, but when I, try to call the function and actually pass it to people and store it to this variable peep strings, it's peep strings undefined. Let's do this. Go down, look at it in a more simple example.
Is it because you didn't return it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm going to have a function called foo. And I'm going to set this equal, like this is just a very basic function. 1. Okay, there we go, foo. Let x equal foo. Dot log x. What is x going to be? It's undefined. Because if I want to actually grab that value, I need to return it. So I return the value, foo returns 1. So this is, you can just think of like foo is just, when I run foo, it's just going to be 1. Foo, call it equal 1. What's this going to log?
It's going to be true because you're asking if it's true.
Yeah, that's true. Calling foo, this is what I talk about like with math. Think of these as like, this is an evaluation, like the same way you would see 1 + 1 and in your head, you'd be like, oh, that's just 2. You start learning how to do that with code. Like, because if I could see this whole thing right here, I could say, oh, what's foo? Oh, foo just returns 1. Okay, so that's just 1. Oh, 1 equal 1. That's just true. And that's what we log. Because if I log like 1 + 2 + 3, it's not going to log 1 + 2 + 3. It's going to log 6. Same thing. If I log, foo equal 1, JavaScript's going to evaluate this before it logs it. Okay. So yeah, going back here, what we forgot is we don't even need to store this to a variable. We forgot to return this map function. There you go. There's my peep strings. There's the array of strings.
And so the reason you can have 2 returns is because one of them is inside the function and one of them is out. Is that right?
The reason I can have 2 returns here is this is its own function.
Because there's 1 return per function.
Yeah, 1 return per function.
Okay, got it.
I mean, you could do something like, you can have 2 returns in a function. Let me show you this. But it's all a function you can have as many returns in a function as you want. But if you hit a return, the function's going to stop. So I could do something like this. If person.age is greater than 21, return. Let's just take this string. Instead of saying the age, I could say like is over 21. Else. Maybe I don't want to reveal someone's age. I just want to reveal whether or not they're over 21 or not. So inside of this function, I have 2 returns. But once it returns one thing, it's not going to, and I can even show this by like doing it this way. I don't even need an else statement. And the reason I don't need an else statement, because this function, if the person's over 21, we're going to return this and then the function's going to stop. Then we'll go to the next thing. And let's make one of these people like 18. So Toby is not over 21. John is over 21. So does that distinction make sense? You can have more, a function can have more than 1 return, but when it hits the return, the function stops.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
Cool. Let's go on to the add peeps. I think that this one is I think as far as the CRUD stuff, this one's, I think, the most straightforward. So with this one, I just want to do grab new people. And what I do is I'm spreading out over the peeps. And I pass it a peep. So that's how I can add something. I don't even need to, and then I can.
Now, are you pulling new people from up top, or that's just a whole new name variable?
That's a whole new variable.
Okay.
So this variable is this new people is going to be scoped only to this function. So let's do this. Let's do const, X once again. Let's do this. Actually, I'll make this confusing. And then, oh wait, no, let's do this. Yeah, let's actually do add peep. And let's just throw the login right here so we can see it. Okay. What are we going to log right here? Like what is the new people variable? So once again, getting a little confusing with the names, but code is well-written code this is not well semantically written code, but it can start to look like this. But just focus on these lines. What is new people going to be?
That's just gonna be your const that you did right above it, right?
It's going to be a new array with the second parameter added onto it.
Yeah, it's
Meeting
going to
array
be,
objects.
yeah, it's going to be a new array 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm calling this new people. I'm calling this add peep. I mean, this is kind of bad names for like adding a thing to an array, right? But really, this is what this function does, is it takes in an array, and then it takes a second item, and it adds that item to the end of the array and returns it. But in my code, I probably want to like call this something like add people, because really what I would expect this to do is, take an array of people. So I can take my people array, and then let's add 4 to it. Well, this is probably going to be bad because, I'm taking my people array and then I'm adding this random 4 to it. Well, I don't want to add 4. I probably want to add a new person. There we go. But yeah, this variable can be called anything x. I don't even need to store this to a variable. I would say actually it'd probably be more clean just to write this like this. Hey, return this value, return that cloned array and that thing added at the end. Let's go do update peep. So this takes an array. So what I want this to do is this takes an array of objects, and yeah, this should have an ID that's needed in here. And an ID and adds 1 to the age of the person. So it finds the ID and then it adds 1 to the age. So let updated peeps equal, I can even call this the same. these are like the same name, but those are two different things. Maybe I'll just not confuse it too much. Okay. So I can grab my peeps. I'm expecting that to be an array, and I'm going to do a map. And then I'll go through each peep or each thing. So how I should really say, I'm going to take an array and I'm going to map over it. And then through each thing in that array, I'm going to perform this function. What I want to see is I want to see if the thing.id equals the ID that was passed to this function. If it does, in this case, this is where I want to copy that person, but I want to add 1 to the age. So I take the age and I'm going to update the age key. It's just going to be p.age plus 1. If the IDs don't match, I just want to return the thing. And then this function can return this variable. So really now I can just do like const y equals, I can call my function, pass it my people, give it an ID, so 1. And then let's just look at our people. So Toby has an age of 18. So after I run this, I would expect, actually let's do did Toby change? Just name that variable this. Did Toby change? Let's do it like this. Is Toby 19? Because that's what Toby should be. Run this.
You didn't say dot log.
Console.log, forgot the log. So right there, type error console is not a function. Tells me that line 46. Boom, forgot the log. Is Toby 19? Yes, Toby is 19. Yeah, so here's another example of a function, where it has 2 returns, but it's, so if the ID matches, let's return the updated person. If it doesn't match, then just return the person.
So the second return is that if it didn't work, it would just return the same the same list, that same array.
Not the array, the thing. So we have an array of people. So if the ID doesn't match, it just returns the person. If the ID does match, well, we want to keep the ID the same. We want to keep the name the same.
And age
We want to update the age. So that's what we're doing here. We're keeping the ID and that we're like cloning the object, but then we're just updating the age.
And then if that were to not have an age, it would just return P, and P as being that same original one.
Yeah, and P is just the thing unchanged.
Okay.
Because
That double return makes sense.
Yeah, because map's creating that new array. With this, I don't want to, when you think about it, it's a weird way to just update, the age of one person. Because you could have an array of 100 things, and you're going through and you're mapping over 100 things just to update one key of one of those objects.
Like, for example, if you had a database and it was their birthday and today was their birthday, so you'd want to update everyone with their birthday, you could do it like that.
No. I mean, this is like React. This is like front end world. It's more like React. This is how you would do it in React. This is not how you would do this in the database.
Okay.
With a database, you would go find the one specific thing and you would update that one specific thing. I think that's why this is a little confusing, because that makes the most sense. It's like, why do I have to create this new array of all my things? Well, it's like, because that's what React wants. If it was a database, it's like, no, let's just go find that one person and update their age and just update that one person in the database.
Okay.
So same thing with like delete. If you wanted to delete from a database, you'd go find the thing in the array and just find the thing in the database and delete it. But with React, what we want to do is we want to take our whole array of people, delete the one thing from it, and return that new array of people with the thing removed. So with that, we just go peeps dot filter. Go through each thing. Just and remember, filter, if this returns true, it's going to keep it. If it doesn't, it's not going to keep it in the new array. So I'm just going to say, hey, as long as the ID of the thing, let's just call this thing. Let's get like, change the name and call this things. This is just saying, hey, as long as the ID of the thing does not equal the ID that was passed, keep it in the new array. So let's log this const F1 for filter one, delete peep. Let's pass it to people. Also .log F1. Why is F1 undefined? What does filter return?
Nothing at the moment.
Nothing was changed.
So would you
Right.
need another return?
Filter itself does, yeah. Filter itself does return a new array. So once again, going back to like the 1 + 1 = 2 example, if I see a filter method, I know that's going to evaluate, and when that evaluates, it's at least going to be in an empty array. Like no matter what, filter is going to return in an array. And then there might be stuff in it, depending on what you gave it. But so in my mind, this whole thing is that array that filter returns. Well, what I need to do, my delete peep function is not returning anything. So I need to return that. I kind of think that's what you're, I think it was Trina. I think that's what you were kind of getting at. So I need to,
Yep.
go. So I
So
need to
that-
actually return the result of my filter method.
And that return would be going to the deleted peeps, and then that's how you have the deleted peeps right there. And then you're defining deleted peeps as F1, and then you console log it.
Yeah. So what if I do, I just delete this and do 1? What is F1 going to be?
1.
It's just going to be 1. Well, I don't want to return 1. I want to return filtering over my things. Let's do another example, F2.
So your return ID is technically returning to the things filter.
What?
Your return thing ID, that gets returned to the things filter, and then the things filter return gets returned to the deleted peeps. Deleted peep.
Yeah, the filter method takes, the filter method takes a function. That's because remember, filter is like, it's a function that JavaScript defines that's like, hey, you give me a method that returns true or false, and I'll remove that thing from the array if your function returns false. So it's a way you can say, hey, JavaScript, remove these items from this array. Like, and here's how I want you to do it. So let's just look at this example. So I'll comment out. Well, let's just have that one there. And okay, so now I have this F2. So I'm calling my delete peep method. What, and then I pass it this random object with ID1, ID2, ID3, and then 4 as the second argument. What is F2 going to be?
Would it delete the IDs 1 to 3 and keep you left with number 4, or the opposite?
Let's try it. Let's run it. Blows up. Things.filter is not a function. Why is I'm passing it a thing? There's a thing, right? I'm passing it something. So why is things.filter? Why is that not a function? What type of data is this right here?
It's an object. It's not an array.
Yeah, that's an object. So I need to make this actually an array of objects. Or just at least in an array. So there's my array. Now I run it. Cool. Now it's working. F2, ID1, ID2, ID3. It didn't filter anything out of this, right? Well, why not? Because I passed it 4 and my filter function saying, hey, does the thing ID, so the thing is just whatever I'm giving it. Like in this case, it's this object with ID1, ID2, ID3. And I'm checking to see if it's matching that second argument, which is 4. So those are never going to match. I give it 2. Now it does remove that. I could say, since these are just numbers, I could say, as long as it's less than ID. So now that removes all of the ones less than 2. And it doesn't just have to have an ID. But yeah, usually with the filter in React and removing one item, we want to just see if it matches the ID. And I have that in there now twice. But yeah, this now can be really just an object of anything. What I really need to make sure is that this object has an ID because I'm using the thing.id to compare. So if this was like IDs, console.log F3. This doesn't remove the ID with 2 because I'm calling it IDs here when I pass it as an argument. My function is expecting a thing that has an ID key. So that's really just going to be undefined. So this is always going to return true. So it keeps all the things.
So do map, filter, and sort, do they all create new items? Do they all create new arrays? Or is it just map and filter?
Yeah, map returns a new array. Filter also returns a new array.
I didn't mean sort, I meant reduce.
Okay, yeah, always same length. Reduce returns what you tell it to return.
Those are like the 3 big ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say reduce returns, any type you decide.
I have a question related. in the real world, like when we're working in our jobs, are we going to be, do actual engineers like remember all this, or do you just like go to MDN and look it up and make sure you like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like you'll get into a job and, you know, depending on what your company uses, there's going to be things that you just commonly do. And so those type of things you kind of remember because you do them a lot. But there's definitely going to be a lot of things that you don't remember and you need to Google. So it's definitely not like a memorization type thing, I think, in my opinion, and my experience, especially when you're working like with different languages. But I think the thing that's kind of, it's more important than memorizing is that you kind of have an idea of what you can do with like arrays. So like, I know I can add something to the start of an array. I know I can add something to the middle. I know I can join two arrays. I know I can like map, filter, you know, I can do all that stuff. I might not know exactly how to do it. Like if someone gave me an array and they're like, hey, remove, you know, 3, 4 from this array, or like, I'm going to give you a start index and a end index, and I want you to remove, you know, that chunk of the array. I might not know off the top of my head how to do that, but I'm like, oh, I know there's a method or something that probably I can pass to those two things and it will do it. And then I can go Google that. I would say for this course, map and filter, you should have memorized. You should know exactly what they do. I'm not saying you don't need to know that now, but these ones are, we're going to use so much. These are ones you should really know how they're working. And I also know this is taking time to know how these works, because I think to understand how these work, you really just have to understand how like functions work in JavaScript, because these are complicated functions, because a map is a function where we pass it a function. And I think that's pretty confusing for some people. And like what this function returns.
Yeah, I think it's confusing.
Like we pass map a function that returns a value, and then map returns a value. So we say like array equals the return value of map, and then map passes a function, you know, we give it a function that returns a value. And then we have a parameter here. Is going to represent the item in this array, you know. So there's like a lot going on in there. That's kind of why like I hold off on reduce, because reduce is even a little more kind of confusing. So I'd say stick with map and filter for now. Really wrap your head around these.
Which one did you say is the strongest one?
Reduce.
Reduce.
Yeah.
Based on the quiz you gave us, those 4 functions, is there anything we can look for in the description that tells us which one to use?
Anything in the description?
Yeah, so like you knew which ones to use map on and which ones to use filter on. How did you know that?
I know that because I know what the like at a high level what the functions do. So when I think of map, I think of taking like in an array of 10 things and transforming it into another array of 10 things that are different somehow than that array. So that's why we use it for like update. because I want to take the array of 10 things and I want to go update just one of the age keys in one of those 10 things. So it's, when someone has their birthday, I'm going to use map because I want a new array of the same people, but I just want to update one thing. It's weird though, but those two arrays are now different.
I'm just wondering if there's like any keywords or something when you're reading, or when someone asks you to do something, is there any phrasing or keyword that you can look for that like helps you know which one might be the best one to use? But I guess it just comes with knowing the two a little better.
Well, yeah, so I think, filter is the word. Like filter is named really well. You're filtering out things from an array. So if you want to remove stuff, if you want to filter out things from an array, filter, right? So filter is very descriptive. So that's why we use it for delete.
Yeah, I get that.
I want to take my array and I want to remove one person from it, or I want to remove 5 people from it. That's filter. Map is when you think you want to change your array. You're not removing anything. You're just changing it. So here we're using map because we're going from an array of these objects to an array of strings.
Okay.
I'm not adding or removing anything. I'm just changing how the data looks.
So if I remember, map is changing and filter is removing.
Yes.
That's a decent way of thinking of those two.
Yes.
Okay.
And another way is to kind of think about the length. So they're both going to return new arrays. And, map is always going to return a new array of the same length. Filter is going to, same length or less. Like it could return an array of the same length, or it could return less. So filter, because you may or may not remove stuff.
Right.
Because with filter, you want to return regardless. So if it didn't have the right one that you're looking for, it still has to return it. So it'd be the same.
Filter, you give it a function that if that function returns true, it keeps it. If it returns false, it doesn't keep it. Because if I gave you an array and I said, hey, would you filter this for me? What would you ask?
Do you want evens? Do you want odds? Like, how do you want it to be filtered?
Yeah, that's how. Okay, I'll tell you how. Okay, so I'm going to give you a function. So here's how I want you to filter. Like I'm going to give you a function. So with each number, if the number is greater, I don't even need an if statement, greater than 3. So here's my function keep. So now we can do like let array equal this. So, and then we can like array.filter. So I'm saying, hey, JavaScript, filter my array. They're like, well, how do you want me to filter it? Well, here's how keep. Okay, so now is JavaScript. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go through each thing in the array and I'm going to see, hey, is 1 greater than 3? No, it's not. Okay, I'm not going to keep it. Is 2 greater than 3? No, it's not. I'm not going to keep it. Is 3 greater than 3? No, it's not. I'm not going to keep it. Is 4? Yes, it is. 5? Yes, it is. 6? Okay, here's your new array, 4, 5, 6.
And then for JavaScript to tell you, you would just console.log quotation or parentheses array filter.
No,
For it to
actually,
return.
this would not work. This actually is not going to work because So I need to store that. I guess that's what you're saying. So I could console
Yeah.
log. Yeah.
And then it would be X. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you though, why did you have to do that? Array filter cannot be defined as a variable?
No, you were saying do this, right? I could just do this. That works.
Okay.
I sometimes throw it into variable. Like I think this can be a little like when you're starting out, this can be hard to read. So store it to a variable.
Don't you need to pass keep a parameter though?
Yeah, keep has a parameter right there.
I know, but like when you console log it, don't you need to pass it something? Don't you need to say console log like array dot filter keep something?
I don't need to.
It already has the value, right, with the array, so you wouldn't need to do that, right?
Yeah, here's my function definition. Like the filter method is going to like, remember the difference when like I call a function and I don't? So I'm giving my filter method the function. I'm not calling it. I'm like, hey, filter method, go through and call this. Because what the filter method's going to do is, you know, it's going to do a for loop and it's going to call, it's actually then going to call the function in the filter method. So the filter method eventually calls my function. I don't call it. I let the filter method call it.
That's trippy. Okay.
Yeah. So, but this is not going to work. I mean, you could see it's an empty array. Why doesn't this work? So as the filter function, I'm telling you, like, I'm telling the person who's like, when I write the filter function, I'm saying, I'll say, hey, you need to give me a function, you know, that shows me how to, whether or not to keep the thing. And let's just call this thing. Give me a function that like tells me whether or not to keep the thing. I need your function to return true or false. If your function returns true, I'll keep it. If it returns false, I won't.
Yeah, so you need to give it a return.
Yeah, so I need to say return. So when I'm using the filter function, I need to make sure it actually returns true or false. And there we go.
So to add on to that, basically every time you do a function, you should always have a return.
No. It depends on how you like what the function's doing.
Okay.
So if
yeah.
you didn't have a filter, if you didn't have filter and just said R and without the return, would it come back?
If I
Does that make sense? Yeah, if you didn't have, let X equals R filter dot R or R dot filter, you get rid of the filter, you could still have it return the function without the return inside the function. If that makes, I'm confusing myself, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I quite understand what you're asking.
Like getting rid of the filter, the dot filter, yeah, and the return.
That?
With, yeah, well, that wouldn't be able to work because when would you, I guess I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I can't do array and then what's going to be wrong with this syntax? This one's a tricky one. If my code looks like this, what would you expect array like ARR to be? If you're just looking at your coder, you're looking at line 88, you don't see anything else. What would you expect ARR to be?
That's like a common nickname for an array, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's a function.
Yes, that's more, the name is less important. The syntax is more like what it's, I would see this, I'm like, that's a function called ARR.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like, so the name, when we name variables, we're naming them for like us as for the human. So yeah, if I'm like a JavaScript person and all of the code I can see is this, you know, all I would know is array is a function that takes some parameter. And I wouldn't even know what keep is, because I can't see it defined anywhere. I'm like, well, keep is something. Just like array one, well, ARR is a function that's taking one and it's returning a value, it's storing it to X, and we're going to log X. So that's what's wrong with that. So let's go back to the filter. Pass it the keep. Let's do this. Let's say I change this to map. And let me get this return back because we do want that return there. So now as the map function, as JavaScript, like the JavaScript filter, I'm like, hey, or as the JavaScript map function, I'm like, give me a function that tells me how you want to change the thing and return it. And that function should return how you want to return the thing. And then I'll throw that into a new array. So what is X? If I change this from, because we had it as filter, let's just run it as filter again. There's 4, 5, 6. But if I change this to map, any guesses on what X is going to be?
It's going to be a new array with just 4, 5, 6, right?
Let's look at it. It is going to be a new array.
The full. Is it going to add those on?
Yeah, because it's going to be this. Remember, map is not going to remove items.
Yeah, so it's going to be the full array plus those ones.
Let's look at it. I think this will help maybe clarify. False, 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 true, true, true.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So map, because what I'm with the map, I'm saying, hey, return this value. Well, it's just seen is thing greater than 3, so it's going to be true or false. So false, 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 true, true, true. So filter, so that's the other thing with filter isn't going to change the value. Like my values in the array are going to be the same. It's just going to remove some of them, all or some of them. Or map has the ability to change the values, but it's not going to change the length of the. And yeah, these are, I should also say, these are new arrays too. My original array is unchanged. That called the function.
For both map and filter, the original is unchanged, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That was fun.
I mean, this is like, I think this is a really good like way at when you're doing your homework. And like, this is like, don't, if you spend like 2 hours doing like a little, or like an example like this on your homework, and that prevents you from getting half of your homework done, but then you like, oh, now all of a sudden I understand map and filter way better. I think that's
Time wasn't wasted.
yeah, definitely not wasted. Because if you get your homework done, like we did all of these functions, and you really don't know what this is doing, but you just kind of figured it out because you kind of maybe looked at the lecture notes and you kind of changed some of the words and you got it to work. Like, I think it's more beneficial to like, you know, or potentially more beneficial to go in and like, just, you know, go look at like a specific example.
And then dissect it in and out.
Yeah. And then go back and try to do it again. So we'll do a similar thing tomorrow. We'll just, because I just really want to like, because like I said, I think it's not just about map and filter. I think it really, to understand map and filter, I think we really need to go in, and it's a good way to really learn about functions. So hopefully like by spending this much time with just map and filter and CRUD, we're not just learning about filter and CRUD, but we're actually learning about JavaScript functions. Are you feeling a little better with JavaScript functions?
Yeah, after something like this, yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, I liked how you set it up to where we went through the problems and broke it down like that. That helped.
Cool. And yeah, that's, I mean, I always like stress trying to break it down. I think it's harder when you're getting started to like break stuff down, but just try doing it. So, cool. Let's take a break. Let's do a 10-minute break. Come back at 11:20. And then we'll get into React, and then we'll do a more like, we'll do a bigger picture thing. So cool. See you then. And I'll Slack this out too. Okay, let's get started. And I'm like freezing. So let's create what I want to do for the rest of lecture. I want to create a React app. We're going to do CRUD actions again. We might, I think I'm going to skip update today because we're going to do a little more detailed one. And we're actually, I do want to do a brief introduction into working with like databases a little. We're not going to write a database, but we're going to actually grab some data from an actual database. So kind of be our first little taste of that. And yeah, so let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to close out VS. So go ahead, open up your terminal. We're going to create a new React app. So I would just cd into your week 2 directory. And we're going to just do our basic yarn create React dash app. Let's call this user CRUD. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call this user CRUD demo 22. And I'll throw this command out, Slack. All right. CD into this. So while that's building, and I would say just watch this. Don't try to code it. I'm going to do a little sandbox demo. And in Slack, I threw out a link to an article that kind of goes over this. Kind of just that I'll be following a little, but I just want to give us just a brief introduction into promises, because since we're going to be doing an API call to an actual database, we're going to see these. So I just kind of want to just go over these for a bit. And once again, this is something I think that is definitely a little confusing to learn about, but it's also really just going to kind of make your knowledge of functions better. So this is going to take a couple times to probably wrap your head around. So I would say for this one, just watch. I'll Slack out the code at the end. So just kind of watch and kind of try to see what's going on. So first, let's talk about like asynchronous code. We're kind of seeing a lot of it with like when we click a button, you know, our code is not happening in order. We're in JavaScript and the web, we want to do things out of order. You know, we want things to happen when a button's clicked. When we work with a database to get data, I mean, we saw this with like GitHub the other day, like it might take a second for us to get the data back because maybe the server's down or maybe it's slow. But we have to like wait for our data to come back. So our code in JavaScript can be asynchronous, meaning it's like not going from top to bottom. It's not in order. So let me give you an example of an asynchronous call. So in JavaScript, there's this function called set timeout. So what I can do with set timeout is I can give it a function as the first argument and then a time as the second. And this is in milliseconds. So this is 1 second. So what set timeout's going to do is it's going to wait however long you give it before it calls this function that we pass it. So this is our callback. So let's just do some logs here. I'm going to do before set timeout. And let's do a after. And then inside of this function, I'm going to do a console.log in set timeout callback. And asynchronous code. So what I mean by asynchronous code, async code here, it does not execute in order. Does not run in order. Right? So what this is going to do is it's going to log before set timeout, and then it's going to log after set timeout. And then it's going to wait a second, then we call this function inside of here. I can do node sandbox. So it runs the before and after, and then it waits a second, and then we finally see that in set timeout log. So that's a little demo of async code, like probably one of the simplest examples you can do. So let's talk about promises. So a promise is a JavaScript, it's built-in promises. Let's just say this, like built-in to JavaScript. So JavaScript knows about promise. So I can create a new promise like this. I can say let promise equals new promise. And I'm going to pass this a function. And you can even see right here, it's kind of telling me these things. And here's what we can call these anything, but what you'll generally see these parameters called is resolve and reject. So here's the function. Now, so a promise is a JavaScript. We can think of it as a class. It's like an object. It's not like a JavaScript object. It's like a JavaScript feature. And to create a new one, we actually see this different syntax where I say new promise, and I pass it a function with a resolve and reject parameter. And I'm just going to copy these so we have there from here. All right. So we can either resolve or we can reject. And resolve and reject, I know these are just parameters, but these are actually functions that the promise knows how to work with. So let me just show you this. So I can resolve something and pass it, some value here. Or I can reject something. So think about like a promise in English, like JavaScript is making a promise. And really what it's promising is that, hey, at some point, I'm either going to resolve or reject the thing. So it's just promising that it's going to execute. Now it's going to be asynchronous, so it can't really say when. But let's go ahead and kind of do this. So what I'm going to do to make this, because promises are really used for asynchronous code. So I'm going to take that set timeout thing we just learned about. I'm going to have it wait 2 seconds. And I'm going to wrap these resolves and reject inside of here. So we're going to wait 2 seconds before we run this code. What we're doing is we're simulating like a database call, let's say. something that takes time. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's grab this. So I can do like a promise dot then. Console.log res. And we can also do a dot catch. Really don't worry so much about the syntax and all of this. I just want to go over like the high level, just kind of see what's going on here. So we can have a promise. So we set this new promise to this promise variable. You can call this like promise var. So maybe the names don't get confusing. I'm going to just get rid of, I'm going to comment out this reject for now. So we're going to wait 2 seconds in this promise, and then we're going to resolve some value here. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to get rid of these logs as well. So we're waiting 2 seconds. So that's what this promise var is not doing. We're doing a dot then dot catch. So after 2 seconds, we're going to resolve some value. What happens if we reject? Or actually, and let's do this so we can see res and error. Let's go back to this resolve. So I'm still going to resolve. And really what you might see this be called is a response. So that's generally what you'll see that called. So what we're doing, we're waiting 2 seconds, and then we just kind of hard code this resolve. So the response is some value. So this would be like a successful, hey, you know, we're going to wait 2 seconds and then you get some value, or we could reject. And that can be, if we reject, then we're going to get an error. We actually hit our catch. So this promise can resolve or reject. And then in our code, because what we want to do is like, you know, we have some like console.log before. Let's just say this is a fake API call. What we're going to do is like inside of here, this is like when we get stuff back. So how this works, we can do stuff before our fake API call, and then we can do stuff after. But then we can like eventually, when we finally get our data back, then we can handle that.
So what would you use this for?
What would we use this for?
Yeah, like what application would this have? Like rather than just waiting 2 seconds and giving us a console log, what is the point of this?
Oh, I love that question. That is the great question. Okay, the point of that is how can I show this? Okay, well, let's say let me just do something. I need to Google this. Okay. Let's say this was synchronous code. So we need to do API call, you know, wait 2 seconds. Like it just takes 2 seconds. Let me actually, I can't, trying to think how to do this off the top of my head. Just go to Google something for something. I know I think there's a way to do it. There's like a quick shorthand. There's got to be a cleaner way.
Is this basically just to put your outputs in the order you want because it's asynchronous?
And we'll kind of see this. So let's say I want to like, you know, get stuff from a database. So we're just saying like, get stuff from DB. And that takes 2 seconds to do that. If it's synchronous, there's got to be a way to time in milliseconds. Wait, sleep. I know there's like a quick way to do this. With a let's do it like this, sleep. So I'm gonna look at this. No, I'm just gonna let me just answer the question and then I'll pull up an example later. But yeah, say we want to get stuff from it, like our code's running. You know, code's running. So we want to get stuff from a database. And this is going to take 2 seconds. If it's synchronous, our code is going to stop there. Why is that bad? Well, what if someone clicks another button or does something else during that 2 seconds? Your code's not going to be able to run because your code stops. Think that's why it needs to be asynchronous, because we want to do other things while it's going and grabbing your data. What if the database call takes a minute? Then you can't do anything for a minute. Like it's going to freeze your code. Your code, you know, like JavaScript can only do one thing at a time. It cannot multitask. It does one thing at a time. So a promise and asynchronous call allows you to be like, okay, hey, let's do an API call. And while you're waiting for that API call, do other stuff.
Okay, I see.
I mean, so yeah, if it were just to like block it, let's just see if this function works. I don't know. This one's. It's kind of working. But yeah, it won't like that. Oh man, it's probably. But that's the point. I'll do a better example of that in this another lecture. But yeah, we don't want our code to stop. We just want it to be like, hey, when you're done, let me know, and then we'll handle it.
Okay.
Save that. So now we can get stuff from database and we can do other stuff, and then we'll handle that. And like the promise is saying, I'm either going to resolve or reject. So I think that's all I want to talk about with this case. Like I said, I'm going to spend more time with promises. This was mainly just a 15-minute introduction. Just so some of these words can start to get into your head. It's kind of the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. So, all right. So let's actually see an example of this and actually do a database call. So we're going to need to add a library to help us out with this. So we have not done this before. So we're going to use this library called Axios. So there are just thousands upon thousands of libraries out there that you can install into your app that you can use to help you with stuff. I mean, libraries for everything. I mean, React itself is a library. We want to add a library called Axios. So how we do that is we do that in the terminal.
Now, do we follow along?
Yeah, so now you would follow along. So make sure you're in your React directory. I'm going to do a yarn add. Let me move that up so it's easier to see. Axios. And I'm going to hit enter. What this is going to do, this is going to install a library called Axios. So now we can, with that one command, we're going to have this Axios library. I think I have this open up in code. I am going to do a git add dot git commit -m just so I can have my initial commit. Yeah, if I look at my package JSON, this was added, this Axios. So now we have Axios installed.
Now,
did-
do we
you
get
did-
add and get commit too, even though we haven't linked to a repository yet?
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that.
Get
Remember,
add.
to do git add and git commit, I don't need to have a repo. This is for like my local machine.
Okay.
And then once I do create a repo and push it up, that git history will be on the repo. Cool. Let's also just, make a change and see if this is running. I think that's always a good step. Make sure you're editing the right file, that kind of thing. That it's running, yarn start. And actually, I'm going to try to just throw this all on the same screen. Sweet. And so I can throw this out. You don't have to make a repo for this, but I will, so I can put it on Slack. And you have reference to this, so we'll do crud users. Let's see here. To add that here. Let's make sure this is going to be up. Go back. Cool. So that is now there. I'll throw this link out in Slack so you have access to it.
Question, where did you check to see the access again? What tab was that under?
The Axios.
Yeah,
Um,
in the package.
yeah. So the package.json, what this is going to do is this is going to tell you what libraries you've installed. So Axios, like all the ones other than Axios, we get by default with the Yarn Create React app, but we can add our own. So we've added Axios. So now that's going to be in there. I don't need to change this. It should just be there. And yeah, then I make a change here. So let me kind of, this is kind of going to be getting into some new stuff here. So I want to grab some actual data from an actual database. And there is this website, recresin. Select this out. This is a it's kind of like a fake database. It allows us to do what's called API calls to kind of, and get back some fake data. So and this is a very basic Internet 101 lesson. We'll get more into this when we talk about Rails and when we get a little more into APIs. But how the web works, the web actually is a pretty simple, has this pretty simple protocol called HTTP. And what we do with HTTP is we need to, and I'm sure you've seen HTTP, right here in the website, HTTPS. The S is just stands for secure. It's a security thing. HTTP is a protocol that computers know how to talk to each other. So what I can do is I can request for things. And actually when we see like these get, post, put, delete, what kind of words are we seeing here? Post, create, put, update. What is that? Delete, delete. What is that looking like it's kind of spelling?
Crud.
Crud. Yeah. So when we talk about CRUD actions are going to have HTTP verbs associated. So when we get more into API calls, like a post request is going to be a way to create something. A put request is going to be a way to update something to like our database. This is more like database level. If we delete, we're going to be able to delete something from our database. And a get request is how we read something from our database. It's how we get stuff from our database.
Quick question. What is CRUD, or what is the definition of CRUD?
CRUD is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're just going to do with the database today, the only action we're going to do is a get. We're going to load our React app and we're going to do a get request to get some users. And actually, when you go to a website, when you do an HTTPS and then you give it a URL, by default, you are doing a get request. So you have done tons of get requests in your life. So, and you know how to do it. You just give it the URL. So, and to check this out, so we just want to get users. And so what I can do here is I can click on this link. And this is actually a website. This is a URL. This is an HTTPS. It's the website resin API users get. So I'm doing a GET request to this URL, and then this database says, or this website says, okay, behind the scenes, it knows what to do, and it gives us back this data. What does this look like? What kind of data does this look like?
To me, it looks like almost a storage of the people who are logging in or the people who are using the app.
I mean, like, yeah, that it looks like users. I definitely see some user information.
Like an object.
It looks like an object. Yeah.
Yeah.
See array
oh.
and object, yeah.
The outer thing is an object. On my object, there's a data key. Let me highlight that. What does the data key look like?
Array.
Yeah, that's an array. And it's an array of
Objects.
objects that have ID, which is a number, email, which is a string, first name, which is a string, last name. This is not quite an object. The technical term for this is JSON. This is JavaScript object notation. And one way you can tell it's JSON is that the keys are strings. But this is very easy to turn into a JavaScript object. So we can do so what we want to do is actually in our React app, I want to do this call. I want to grab this data. You know, this is how we're going to actually start making our React apps useful, is have them hooked up to a database. So let's start with like this, the simple one of just grabbing data from an actual database. So let's do this. Let's do this on a button. I'm going to say get data. I have a button that says get data. Let's set this up const. I'm going to call this function get data, or I could call this, maybe since I know what kind of data I'm getting users, I might want to be a little more specific. Get users. Cool. So now, like, and just as you're going through with React, I mean, I know we're doing something new, but it's always good just to get stuff working. Do these small steps. So I click get users. Let's make sure we save that. Oh, yeah, because now I'm testing it. It's not working. Why am I not seeing that log? Oh, I forgot to put the on-click handler here. Do I want to call this function or do I not want to call it? Yay, nay. What do you think?
If you
So
call
I
it,
was-
like this loop, right?
Yeah, since it's on click, I don't want to call it because I want to wait until the user clicks the button. If I have it calling it, then it's going to run when I like refresh the page.
Okay.
So I don't want that. So now it gets clicked. Now it gets logged when they click the page. So I have that. All right. So now we want to do our Axios call. So this is why we installed Axios. So import Axios from Axios. So like React, we don't need to give it, since this is something we've downloaded, we don't need to give it the relative path. We just give it the name. So I just say import Axios from Axios. Now I want to do a GET request. So I'm going to, and Axios has really nice syntax. it has a get request, or get function, I should say. And the get function, I just pass it the URL. And I'll throw this out in Slack, the URL. Because this was what we did in our web browser. We did a get request and we got back this data. So I do a get request to this URL. I want to show you this. So Axios.get returns a promise. Remember, a promise is something that is going to either resolve or reject. So I can do the dot then. We're actually going to learn about a cleaner way to write this because this gets a little messy, but you'll definitely see this example. So I kind of want to just go over it here. And I'm also going to just Slack out this. This is like the general syntax. It's going to be an Axios.get URL then. Call that the res or response. And then on top of here, we can call .catch error. And this would be like error occurred in API call. So I'm going to select that out. That's just a general syntax.
Can you show your full line 13 to the right of it?
Yeah, I'm going to expand this in 1 second.
Okay.
So yeah, my Axios is a function. Like this syntax gets a little weird. My Axios.get, it takes a URL, but then on that we can call it .then, which takes a function that has this like response param and a catch, which has a error param. And I will Slack this out too. Okay, so inside of these brackets, let's just console.log res. And console.log so I can go to my console. I'm going to go click on my button. And there we go. There's my response. There's that data that we were looking at. Well, it's actually, it's a little different. So Axios is doing some things. I actually have to drill into res data to grab the key. So let's just do this. Res.data. Get users. So res.data, that's the object. So this is actually the object see in browser. I should say this, it's the JSON we see in browser converted to JS object. Console.log res.data.data. So you kind of have to drill into this. This is where you're going to get very good at working with nested data, because I want to get the array of people. That's actually going to be in res.data.data. Get users. Res.data.data. There it is. There's
The first console log is just giving you the JSON then?
no, it's actually we actually don't ever get the, we kind of, I kind of lied a little. We actually don't get the JSON because Axios is actually doing some stuff for us. So the response, this is coming from Axios because we're doing an Axios.get. So this is the response back from the server. And this has a whole bunch of other things, like it has headers, it has this request, it has a status. You know, we don't see like the status in here. It is coming back to Chrome. Chrome does have it, but it's just not displaying it. What we're seeing here is actually the res.data. See, that has the data, that has the per page, the total pages. That's what we're seeing.
And then you connected the button to get data at the bottom with when you put on click and then you put get users, and that's the name of this function.
Yeah.
Okay, that's understandable.
And yeah, so
you basically have to kind of go in like 2 or 3 levels to actually get it to a point where it's like readable data, essentially.
yeah, because I can even drill in here. So here's just the res that I'm getting back from the .den. So there's the response. And inside of there is a data key. Well, inside of that data key is a data key, which is actually my array. I could then go look into my first thing. There's the one person.
That's the info you want. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like the res.data.data is my users.
Got it.
So what I'm going to do, well, I want to have users state now. So I'm going to say users and set users equals use state. I need to import use state. I'll just do it manually. Import use state from React as a string. Okay.
Question,
So
was there a specific reason why you put the use state above the Axios?
yes. Okay. So there is a rule that we use state any, and this is, so use state is what's called a React hook. Any React hook, there's a rule. It just has to be at the top level. And what I mean by top level, it doesn't have to be at the top. It can't be nested inside of anything. If I put use state inside of a function, I'm going to get this error. You know, React or like components, like it's just saying like a hook cannot go inside of a function. You can't put a hook inside of an if statement. They have to go at like your nested level. So I just like to throw all my hooks at the top. I could throw it here, but okay, so maybe, yeah, I could set my array to an empty array, or I could just say, let's just say empty array. And also, let me show you this. So one of the nice things about RecRes, they have like this little, we can actually simulate a delayed response. So it like takes time. Like it's loading. This can be nice because like what we can do is we can simulate a load that's taking a while. So let's do like 2 seconds. And I'll throw this whole Axios call out right here. Because I know that's or the whole get users function. Because there's a lot going on there. So now we can, clear our console. We can click get users, but it's going to now take 2 seconds. And then we get our data. So what I want to do here is I want to set my users to res.data.data. Right? I can't. And then we could also do something like this. We could do just to kind of demo this, and then we'll make it a little cleaner. Let's do this. Let's do a JSON.stringify. So my initial state of users is just that empty array. And then we click the button. It's going to wait 2 seconds. And then we get our users from our database. Let's add some more state. Let's just see how easy it is to like add some UI, so we can see that this is actually loading. So let's do like a loading state. So by default, do you think this should be true or false? And it really is for this specific case, how we're doing this exact case. Are we loading by default, like when we refresh the page? Are we getting the data?
No, you only do it when you press the button.
Yeah. Yeah, we only do it when we press the button. So I think by default, I want this to be false. So sometimes when you're asking yourself, hey, what do I want my initial state to be? You kind of just got to decide how your app's working and what makes the most sense for your use case. And yeah, I think this makes sense. We're not loading until we click the button. So, and this will kind of help maybe also show this get users in the Axios call. So what I want to do is right here when we click get users, I want to set loading to true. And I don't want to set this loading false until we're done. Well, where is that? That is here. That is in the .then. All right. And then I can do something like this. I can, because maybe I don't want my user to click the button if we're loading. Like I should disable the button. So I can say there's a disabled, or is it disabled? Is it disabled? Okay, it's disabled. So if we put a disabled prop on our button, you can't click on it. But I can set this equal to a Boolean. And let's just hard code it for now so we can see what it does. So if disabled is true, we can't click on it. If disabled is false, we can click on it. So I'm going to use my loading Boolean. So if we're not loading, I should be able to click it. But then when I click it, now it becomes disabled until we get our data. And then
Can you send that update to Slack right now? I was just a little bit behind.
Yeah. We'll throw this whole thing out. I'm just going to delete this one and post a new one. So let's see what the .catch is doing.
How come the JSON.stringify is showing an empty array on the page before you load the data?
Yeah, because when I set my users, I just set it to an empty array. So that's my initial state.
Okay.
And then I click get users, which is going to take 2 seconds because I added that delay. And then we get the users.
I mean, could you just leave it blank, or would you not want to do that? Your use state.
We'll look at that in a second. It depends.
Quick question. So whenever you put the button disabled while loading, how does it know when to let you click it again? How does it know when the loading is done?
Because right here in our get users function, and this is the asynchronous code. So when we click get users, we set loading to true.
Yeah.
So when we call these setter functions, it's going to re-render our component. So set loading is going to be true right here. So then disabled is going to be true. So we can't click it.
And then when it's done, the set load false that you added at the end will enable the button again.
Yeah. So now then when that's false, then disabled's false and we can click it.
Okay.
And we could also do something like this. We could use our loading Boolean. We could do like a little ternary to like give them a message. Be nice to our, give it a little good UX. Let's do a loading
Excuse me.
question mark. So now when I click get users, now it's going to say loading. So it gives them that message, like a visual, it gives the user a visual message like, hey, it's loading, be patient. How do
Can
you
I see
think
that one more time? You had loading and what was after it? Dividing the loading. Okay, semicolon.
just do it and you see how often we're like how handy ternaries are coming in? Hey, if we're loading, let's have the text be loading. If not, let's have the text be get users.
Before we move forward again, I'm still, can we just go over the loading? We don't have to redo the loading, but can you just go over it again of why it understands with just the word loading? Because I'm confused on that for just a second.
Yeah, so this would go back to the use state hook.
Use state, and because you put in the const loading, that's what it looks back to.
Yes, so remember with use state, if I'm looking at like a generic thing, we get, some state as the first thing, and then a way to set some state. I'll just say state and then set state. Equals use state. This would be our initial state.
Okay, so when you're calling back the disabled equals loading, you're just calling back to that use state in const of loading, set loading to false.
Yeah, loading's a so loading is a variable.
Okay.
And set loading. So loading is a variable that is storing the state, and the state's changing, but this is like the initial state. So loading right now is false.
Right.
Our user state is the initial state's an empty array. But whenever we call the set, the second thing in this use state, the set function, that's going to update that state. So if I say set loading to true here, it will change loading to true. And it also triggers a re-render. So then loading would be true. So this would be disabled. Loading would be true. So then we would say loading.
Okay.
And that's what we're seeing.
And then when it finally gets back to false, everything goes back to default.
Well, then, it goes back to loading, just goes back to false. And so then it runs this code again. It's like disabled,
And disabled false, and then loading false. So
Yes.
it would have get users on the button.
Yeah.
So the whole delay and loading aspect is just to like simulate like you're actually reaching into a database, which would take time. So you want to code it that way so that your code doesn't break when it's loading.
Yeah, but I mean, so this is still like, I can get rid of this delay. And I'm gonna this will still do it. It might be hard to see because it might be quick, but it's still gonna this still actually has to go to, wherever this server is.
Yeah.
So you're gonna see it.
Yeah.
Like it was there, right? You see
Yeah, you saw
Yeah,
it for a
so-
second that first time.
yeah. So this is just nice to throw on this delay because then we can really see it.
You're right.
So yeah, this would be good for testing. And then, yeah, obviously you would not want to leave that in there because it's just slowing down your app by 2 seconds, which is what we try to avoid. So let's
if you
look at
put delay 5, it would be 5 seconds, delay 10 seconds.
yeah. Yeah, so that is the amount of seconds. Yeah, that's going to be delayed.
I also heard websites are set up to delay on purpose to show loading because people were calling into tech places saying they were having problems because they couldn't see something was happening, so they thought it wasn't working.
Well, yeah, that's definitely why, we don't need to do this, all this UI stuff, right? We could just have our button say loading and not have this disabled. On click. This is how we had it before. Or get, whatever. Yeah, but when I click get, and let's refresh, I'm clicking get, I don't see anything happen. So users are going to think it's broken, right? When it's working. So all of this stuff is not really necessary for the functionality. This doesn't do anything functionally. What it's doing is it's giving the user visual cues that stuff is working. Hey, or that it's loading. So that term is UX, user experience.
Now, another quick question. On your console to the right, you know how you have the res data. That's what you typed in the console log just to kind of format it so you can see it.
Yeah, this is so we can see, hey, what is our response? Well, response is an object. Well, let's look at response.data. What is that? Oh, that's an object. Well, that has data on that. What's res.data.data? Well, geez, there's finally our array of people. That's really what we want to get for this. We want to just get our list of people. Let's do error handling just to see what an error, what that might look like. Any ideas of how I could cause an error with this GET request?
You just change one thing in the UL.
Yeah, just change one letter here.
Yeah, that's gonna break it.
So, right, if I don't give it the right URL, what the heck?
I think you pulled from another random one.
That works. Is this just a? No way.
That was nuts.
That's funny. What? That is random that worked. How did that work? I wonder what this is returning. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah. I guess uses works. Gives back something with an ID, name, year, color. Okay. But yeah, let's change the URL.
Oh, they're flowers.
Are they flowers? Uses?
Yeah, tiger lily. I see that one. Turquoise. I don't know.
So yeah. So now I changed it from red. I got rid of that S. So now it's a bad URL. And if I do it in my console, I say get users, I'm seeing an error. Oh, I'm getting the cores error. That's interesting. I was kind of expecting a 404, but anyway, this is breaking. We're not going to really worry about the errors. Actually, I do want to see if we can like find, that's a different URL. Okay, let's do this. I want to see if we can see the 404. I'm like hitting like, actually, that was an actual website. That's funny. I'm like getting all these errors that are interesting. Okay.
I was like a 1 in a million chance.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. So this is something you might see. You're going to get different errors potentially when you get requests. I think a common one, and you've probably all seen this one, is a 404 error. Has anyone seen that before?
Yeah. Make jokes about it a lot.
Yeah, that's just like a not found, like page not found. Because I gave it what it's saying, like this website saying, hey, like I don't know what this URL is. It's not found. But for now, let's just have like an error state. And let's just set this to null. And just to show you this, we can maybe get a little more information if we do error.response. But notice when I'm doing this, like it's logging the error. Seeing the error, I don't really see the error.response. But there's my 404. So let's just do here, we're actually hitting this catch. So what I'm going to do is let's just take this set error. And I'm just going to hard code a message. Just be like, we're not going to do like any real error handling right now. I'm just going to say some error occurred. Cool. So right
That
here,
error is already a syntax in the JavaScript or the React.
what?
Did you that's like the set error is already a syntax in the React, so it knows to give you a error code back, or what is that?
You did the set state for that, right?
Right here.
I think it's talking about in the Java.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's where it's coming from. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I was
we
wondering.
have. I'm creating a hook. I'm creating some state. I want to have some error state. So right now I'm setting it to null.
Okay, I see.
Because what I could do something like this: error, and I could like. So if I do have an error, let's set that message. So let's hit refresh. So I get users, and there's my error. Some error occurred.
And that wasn't there until the error occurred.
Yeah. Let's give it some style. Let's make it red. Yeah, because I only set the error in my catch.
Can you refresh and do it one more time? I didn't get to see it.
Yeah. So because right now and this is my initial state of of error is null. Right? So we don't even see this message at all. Because error is null, so we're not going to render this paragraph. If we do get the error, so I click get users, then we do render this paragraph. So there's my error, and then I'll interpolate or I'll use JSX to grab that error message, which I just hard coded right here.
Okay. I'm kind of starting to understand more of the set loading and then the use.
Yeah, cool.
Or like set and use just in general.
But what I might also want to do here is also set loading, because loading's done here, right? Because if an error occurs, like I know the loading's done, it just wasn't successful, but it's done. So also set loading to false. So error, some error code. And then this way they can like try again. But it's not going to work because it's a 404.
So what did at the end, the catch, what did the set loading false do? I'm completely caught up, but I just didn't get that.
Yeah, because the loading, we're using the loading variable to change the state of our button.
Oh, so now it won't try to do it again. It's saying that it's false.
Yeah, but if I have an error, I still want to set loading to false because I want to be able to like try again.
Oh, to get users again instead of it staying at loading.
Yeah, if I don't have that there in my catch,
It's gonna stay at loading and blanked out.
yeah,
Okay.
it's gonna stay like that.
All right.
And something else I might want to do now that I have loading, or that I have this error, I'm going to set error to null before we try to do the Axios call. So let's look what that does. So now I click get users. There's my error, some error occurred. I click it again. It gets rid of that message for a second. My delay is not working because it's not actually, I can't test the delay on this one, but it does momentarily get rid of the error and goes back to loading. So we've done loading, we've done some loading, some basic loading UI and some basic error UI. So now we can like fix that back. So I can click get users. Now that error message is gone. 2 seconds, we grab the users.
Can you update that on Slack again, please?
Yeah. I'm just gonna delete this again. Throw it there. So yeah, that's what we're gonna stick with this as our data, like getting our data. Like this is our Axios call. This is kind of like your first taste of, oh crap, my better one. Give me 1 second. I don't think I have a computer plugged in. This is like the first, little taste we're getting of actually working with a database. So we're grabbing data from a database and now we're hooking it up to React. Sweet. So when we get back, and we're not going to do any of the CRUD actions with the database from here on out for the rest of the lecture today. We're just going to do it in React, but this is, yeah, just a brief intro into this so you can at least kind of start to wrap your mind around it. But I get this is very challenging, and one of the challenging things about it is the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. But it's just how the web works, click on stuff, you need to wait for stuff to come back. So let's take a break. It's 12:30. Let's take a quick break and see when we get back, if we can get through maybe create. So we'll need to do a read. So we'll do a render and a read. Maybe a create and maybe a delete and a create. So take a 10-minute break. And yeah, we'll go from there. So come back 12:40. I'll push this up to GitHub as well. Okay. So let's go through and make this. We don't want to just do JSON stringify. Let's make this a little more neat. So what I'm actually going to do here, just to kind of show you, I'm going to make a new component because we have users, right? These look like they're user objects. I'm actually going to make a component. I'm going to call it user.js to just show one user. All right. So const user equals, and this is just going to be a React component. Let's just get this. Now I'll select this out. I'm going to go a little quick on this one, especially on the style. Just do 1 pixel solid and margin to create some space, just so we can kind of see this. Okay. So if I look at my user, just from looking at this JSON or this, what this looks like, it looks like a user has an ID, an email, a first underscore name, and a last underscore name, and an avatar. So let's grab some of this data. Now, as I'm writing this user component, how do you think I'm going to get this ID, this email, this first name? Where do you think I'm going to, just in the context of this file, where do you think I would grab those from?
Wouldn't you have to pull that from the URL, the database?
Or can you pull it from the app.js because that's where you have it being pulled from?
Yeah, so really the user state is going to live in my app.js, and my app.js will eventually render this user component I'm creating. So when I'm just writing this file, I haven't done it yet in my app.js, but how do you think I could like access the email here?
And have it print every single email?
I just wanted to,
Is that where the props comes in?
yeah, this is where I'm gonna, oh, this is the props. I'm expecting like, this should get like an email because this is only to render one user. So I'm expecting a user to have an email. Let's do this. And then maybe I don't want to do this as an H1. That's fine. Let's do this as a paragraph. And I want to grab the name. Let's maybe do the name as an H1. So the name, I can kind of look at my data like, oh, it's a first name and last name. So I can kind of do like a props dot first underscore name. And because I just want to kind of throw these together, props dot last underscore name. And so I think that's good for now. So that's just one user. And then I can export default this user component. But when I render this user component, I want to give it the email, first name, and last name. And I'll select this out as promised. Okay. So now my app.js, instead of doing this JSON stringify users, let's just do like, I'll throw this in a function. Actually, maybe I don't even need to do this in a function because what I can do is I can do my users.map and give it a function, go through each user. And this, I want to return my user component that I just created. see, let's clear this. Let's get users. Nice, server not running. Not save this. I'm expecting this to have a change, so just change something simple and see if my app is changing. Nope, it doesn't look like when I hit refresh or something, it doesn't look like my server's running. Okay, so let's start my server. Get users. Okay, so I'm at least showing the email in my use, like, because I hard coded that email string, but it's not saying the actual email. So like if I wanted to pass my email, I could do email equals u.email. Do my first name, right? That first name prop. This is already getting a bit tedious. But let's just do it here and then I'm going to show you a better way. Right? And there's my first name. So I could pass down all these things as props, but there's a little shorthand for this. And I'm going to comment this out just so you can see what I can actually do with my component. Is I can just spread out over this U thing. So let's go back to like the start of the day when we're talking about map. And I'm talking, so I'm calling users.map and I'm saying this U variable. What is U? Let's also just go back. Just so we can.
Is it a parameter?
It is a parameter, but what, if I were to ask, like, what data structure is U? What type of data is it?
You would be considered that whole.
It's expecting an array, right?
It's not the array.
Mm.
It's going to be the it's going to be the whatever type of data, or it's going to be the thing of the, like the individual thing of the array. So if I did like I mean, this doesn't really
Like the
work.
individual key.
It's the thing. So if I do U, you know, and then I ask the same question, what type of data is U here? I mean, if I hover over it, it even says it. If I did like type of.
A number?
Yes, that's a number because my things are numbers. If I did 123.map, what type of data would you be?
It'd be a string.
Yes.
So going back up to users, it'd be a string.
No, because my
No.
users.
That'd be an object because they're objects.
Yes. It'd be an object and an object that looks like that. That has the ID key, the email key, first name key. And that's what I'm doing here. If I go back here, see how I'm treating you like an object, u.email, u.first name. And that works. I'm getting, oh yeah, I can't do this down here.
I believe you just deleted the export app too.
I did, thank you. I'm going to get rid of this delay because let's just do a second. So I'm passing, you know, this is working where I'm passing the email, u.email, first name, u.first name. But there is a shorthand. I can just spread out over this object because U is going to be an object. I couldn't do this if like users was an array of numbers. I can do this because users is an array of objects. So I can spread out over it. And that's going to like pass the props down, whatever on that object. And then I can grab, the first name, last name, email. Could also grab like the ID. Does they have an ID? Also had like an avatar, I believe. Like an image link. So that's a nice little shorthand, this ... u. Instead of having to type this all out like email equals u.email, first name equals u.first name, last name equals u.last name, ID equals u.id, avatar equals u.id. Can do that all in one line. It still wants a key though. I'm getting this morning, should have a key. What do you think I could use for a key? Something that's unique.
Kind of like a
ID?
good name to describe that.
Yeah, and I thought I heard it.
ID?
Yeah, the ID. I kind of expect the ID to be unique. And that's just something like when I'm mapping over something or I'm giving React an array of JSX, it wants to have a key because it uses it to kind of keep track of stuff behind the scenes. Cool. So there's I'm getting the objects and I'm now rendering them. I'm also doing it in a way that's like, I didn't have to create this user component, but by doing it, I'm kind of making this, this code's already getting a little messy in my app.js, but now by making this user component, I can kind of do all my user stuff here. So if I want to do like a delete, let's do a delete, and then I think we'll probably end it at that. So I want to delete a user, so let's just do like a button. Delete. So I can do a on click. Now, normally what we would do is, I'd have a delete user function here, right? And give it the ID. Let's just do this. Let's just do it like this for now. This is not how we're going to eventually do it, but. So I have this const delete user on click. Let's do delete user, pass it the ID, props.id. Clear my console. So now I'm clicking it. I'm at least deleting the user to delete. Okay, who can see the problem though now? I have the ID. Where do my users live though? Like, where does that user state live?
It's still in that array, right?
Yeah, it's in my app.js. So it's like, I need to delete the user from this state in my app.js. So what I'm actually going to do is, because I can do this delete user function here, and then I want to, remove from users. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this delete user from props. Mind blown. And so then I'm going to define this function in my app.js. And then I'm going to pass it to my user as props. And I called it delete user in my user component. I'll set it equal to that. So now delete user. Now my user, now I'm passing it in my app.js. I'm passing it this function. Notice the coloring. This white, that's the actual function. The delete user, even though they have the same names, let's maybe just change up the names just so we can see which is which. So I'm going to have a delete user yo prop whose value is going to be delete user, which is this function. So now in my user component, do I need to change this name? Here it's delete user yo, that's delete user props.delete user. Does this need a yo? It's a little quiz. The answer is yes. This is the name of the prop. We'll call this whatever. T. If I call it T here and I'm setting it equal to delete user, this function, I need to call it T there. But now when I click delete, it's now logging the ID and it's logging the ID in my app.js. So it's calling this function here in app.js. See, we're in our app.js. Yay. So I'll call this delete user yo, just so you can see for the example, the difference in names, but I probably would just call that delete user and have them have the same name. But I do want to show they are different. And VS Code, that's why it's giving you different colors. This is blue, this is white. They're two different things, even if they have the same name, two different things. So now I do have my delete user. Well, cool. Now I can just do what we did today. I have a users array. I want to remove an ID from that. I want to go through my user's ID and remove the one ID that matches this ID. How do I do that?
Filter.
Yeah, dot filter. So then we go, okay, let's go through you, or let's do it, let's call it X. What type of data is X?
Would it be an object again?
Yes, and what kind of object?
It'd be no. That would be for your ID.
It's the complete user object, because users is this array. So X is going to be the same thing that U is right here. So map, I'm calling it U here. In this filter, I'm calling it X. But since I'm calling it on the users array, those are going to be the same thing. So X should have an ID, right? X.id. I'll just call it U so it's not confusing or less confusing. So user.id, as long as that does not equal the ID that was clicked. So I can say let new users or whatever, and then I can set my users. So this is kind of an extra step with React. You know, normally with the, like what we did today, we would have returned, you know, we would have said return new users. And someone was asking, do I always want to return something from a function? And the answer was no, it kind of depends. I don't want to return new users here. I want to set, all I want to do is I want to set users to that variable. So this function is not returning anything, but it is, you know, it's going to change my state. So I can get my users, we're loading, can delete, and it deletes it from my UI. And then I can get users again to refresh. So we're not actually deleting from a database. So maybe like to do delete from database and then update our UI. We're not going to get into that for a while, but that would be the step. We'd want to, you know, delete from our database and then update our UI. Right now, we're just updating our UI. Cool.
If you're like a junior developer out of place, how do you prevent how are you stopped from like messing stuff up majorly? Does someone like watch over you? Or like
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to do like, just to show you, I'll do like a git dot git commit dash m, because we're going to end for today. We'll finish this up tomorrow. I think this is enough. Yeah, how this is prevented, there's a lot of different ways, but mainly one of the biggest ways it's prevented is you're probably not going to be able to push up to master. And definitely not, let's just say master branch is the branch that's like actually you see on your website, the production website. They're not going to like, no company's going to let some random person push up to that master branch. So we're going to get into like branches later, but essentially what you do is you like in Git, I'm going to check out a branch like James, and then I can come in here and just destroy everything, break it. I can do a git add dot commit dash m. Awesome. But yeah, I'm not going to do this because it would work, but there's ways on GitHub you can prevent someone from doing a git push origin master. Like it'd be like, you can't do that. So what I would do is I do a git push origin James.
okay.
So that's how you do it.
And I was just gonna say also, could you Slack the 2 slides?
The what?
The app and the user.js, can you Slack that?
Yeah. So and just let me show you, we'll talk more about this in later, but just so you can see, I think it's good to get some of these words just in your head. So I created a branch. So what I can do is I can do a compare and pull request. So I can create a pull request. So this is what you would do. You would create a pull request, and then people would go look in at the changes, like a peer or like a senior dev. They would be like, no, I'm not going to push this. I'm not going to merge this to master because it's broken. So that's how you would do that. We'll talk more about that later. But yeah, so now this is all broken, right? And I want to get back to a working state because I need to slack it out. Well, I can just do a git checkout master. Oh, I should have saved that crap. No. Oops. I hope I didn't screw that up. Damn it. I totally did screw that up. But
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I can fix it. I actually did, before I did that, I'm pretty sure I pushed up to master. I forgot to save it. And there's other ways I could go in and fix that. The changes are definitely there. What did I call this? What was this? Users?
I believe you named the user crud demo and then your spring 22.
Okay, I didn't. That's why I like to append it with the. I forgot to do it here. Yeah. So how do I want to fix this? Yeah, let's. Yes, sure, override. It's on GitHub. Let's just see if I can. Okay, that's saved. Yeah, now on master, this is all broken. That's not do. Let's do a git pull origin master. So I'm going to pull down from GitHub. Oh my God. Okay. Did I not push this up? It's right here. I'm just going to copy it. This is not the way to do it, but here we go. Okay, so here's the app.js file. Here's the user file. And it's also up on GitHub. So yeah, I think that is good for today. It's a lot of material. I'm going to give out a homework. So the homework will be something similar to what we did at the start, where we just in JavaScript went through like the array of, what was it? I already forgot. Was it people? So I'll give you something like that with a different object. And then I would want you to try to do this Axios call again, like from scratch. Try it in a React project. And I would say just you can use the same call, but just try to do this again and try to type it out on your own. Like don't copy and paste it. Like try to go through these steps. And maybe even do like the delete function. But tomorrow we'll go through and we'll finish the CRUD. We'll go through this again and we'll finish the CRUD. So the create and the update, because the update's definitely a tougher one. And we'll probably get into React Router tomorrow too as well.
You said
How would
get
you
into what
recommend?
tomorrow? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just gonna ask, how would you recommend that we like do this on our own without like not like copying pasting it, but just like looking over and seeing what we did over here? Because like I obviously couldn't do this from scratch.
Yeah, so I think, so let me kind of just show you like this homework. All right, we can also talk about it when we get back from lunch, but something, because here's kind of what I'm working on with like the homework for you. Something that I think that would be good for this one is to like we're doing today, like experiment changing the names. So I think, like change this to X and like, how does that change stuff? Like really kind of mess around with this. So with this, I think something you can do with this is, yeah, you will be copying it. I'm not expecting that you're going to do it. I shouldn't say from scratch. I should just say, don't like command copy, like type it out. And then also throw in console.logs like I did here to see what's going on. Like try experimenting with stuff. So you could use this as a template, but then try like adding logs, maybe you say you want to like throw in a spinner on your loader instead of loading. Like, how would you do that? Just, it's kind of like this experimenting thing and just really trying to figure out like, why, like what's going on here? Why is there not a return here?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But this is, I think between like, I think this will be quite a bit. So I think with this, with the React app, if you could just go through and even if you do follow line from line and just kind of type it out and you are like by copying, I mean, I don't want you just to do like a Command A, Command C, Command V, and then you're done. Like type it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, just like kind of typing it out line by line.
Yeah.
That's what I've like kind of had to do in the past, but no, that makes sense to
Cool.
just figure it out.
Sweet. Well, yeah, and yeah, we'll go over that more as we get back from lunch, but yeah, let's take lunch. Let's come back at 2:10.
Yep, sounds good.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.